Hi, I'm Maria Mandarino, licensed acupuncturist, certified Enneagram practitioner, spiritual director, and Bach flower practitioner. Thank you for being here. I have promised you guys this interview for a while, and I'm so excited to finally be able to do it. This is Lisa Dowling, who is going to speak to us today about being an Enneagram 8. Lisa has been practicing acupuncture and Eastern medicine for over 20 years. That's how we've met. And she has a program online for massage therapists and acupuncturists to get continuing education credit. Her website, and I'll have this in the show notes, her website is meridiancarecenter.com, and she has classes there on cupping, Eastern medicine, shiatsu, muscle testing, meditation, and movement. So welcome, Lisa. Also, she is in rural Eastern Ontario, joining us today from there. So thanks for being here, Lisa. Welcome.
Thank you.
And yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself beyond what I just, what can you expand on?
Well, I'm not sure what to say. Life's been an interesting adventure, for sure. I kind of moved up to the countryside just about 2.5 years ago to, live a quieter, less hectic life.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
yeah, circumstances brought me here, but I guess I didn't know I was an 8 until I met you, but I've always sort of been one. So
yeah, yeah,
it explains a lot of
yeah.
who I've been and the adventures and very full existence that
Mm,
that
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. When we met, did you even know about the Enneagram?
I'd heard of it
Okay.
in a vague sort of way, but I
Uh-huh.
never really looked at it in
Yeah,
a lot of depth.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know when we met, we're not supposed to type people, but it's kind of hard with an 8 that's like really in the fullness of their 8. And you're like the perfect example of there you are living a very 8 life, having no clue what that even meant. And then we met online, and just some of the things you would say and the bold way you'd say and do things. I'm like, this woman's an 8. And my experience with 8s, because I am a 5 and I have that line to an 8, a fair number of types have a bit of an aversion to 8s because they're just overwhelmed by them. 5s
Yeah.
typically say, well, that's my happy place, because when I'm completely, at ease with myself, and this is the direction I'm going in to attain something, when I feel secure in life, I take on an 8-ish energy, but I take it on in a 5-ish way, right? So when I recognize an 8, a healthy 8, they make me feel grounded and safe, and I love being around them, because here's the thing. I know they're going to do the right and ethical thing in a situation. They will take charge. They will be ethical leaders. They will be authentic, and I'm good, right? So in my little 5 land, I love being around a healthy 8. So I think I kind of can hone in on an 8 easier than most other types just by watching. And I had pointed that out to you, and I know in the beginning you had a little bit of pushback on that, which in and of itself is an 8 thing. So tell me about that moment when I suggested that you might be an 8, that your responses to things were kind of 8 like. Um, what was your process like?
Well, what comes to mind about when you first mentioned my Enneagram was I was saying something about my partner and his um, complete inability to take any action on dealing with his cancer diagnosis,
Mhm.
and how frustrating it was for me, and that my inclination was to kind of step in and take control of things, but that I knew that it was his process and his life. And you were like, well, that's his, unhealthy 9, I think it
Yeah.
was, and your 8 wants, you're connecting in that space, and you sort of gave some advice how, the space where an 8 and a 9 could connect, and it made a little bit of sense to me. But of course, then I read about an 8, and I'm like, why is everyone always just thinking I'm such an asshole? Kind of thing. And I'm also a Gemini, and it's a very similar thing with Geminis, where a lot of people just think they hate Geminis because they're liars, or they're, insincere, or whatnot. And I've had to get to know not only the sign, but sort of get to know myself as well, to know what parts of that um, I resonate with and that I'm okay with, but also what parts of that I have to work on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, so there's I'm not like that. It's not me. And then reading some other stuff, and particularly, the piece about being the protector, because that's one of my self-proclaimed nicknames is Mama Bear, that,
Yeah.
anyone
Yeah.
who's in my world, in my circle,
Mhm.
that I will literally, go to battle for them. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, I have that one, but I really had to read all of the other Enneagrams
Mhm.
first,
Right. Yeah.
before I could sort of accept that I was
Yeah.
probably more like this one
Yeah.
than the others.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the subject of Mama Bear, um, and that is one of the ways we describe Enneagrams, Mama or Papa Bears. Are you, which word resonates first for you? Because they both will, but which one comes up first? Protector or challenger?
Tough one. I mean, in a way, they're kind of both.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, I see them as being very similar. I think probably at this point in my life, I would even say more the challenger, because there's actually not, I've learned that there's really not a lot of people that I'm willing to go there with
Mm-hmm.
anymore. So, whereas, someone who's not in my inner circle,
Mm-hmm.
who is misbehaving or being unethical, or
Mm-hmm.
manipulating, or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
um I generally will, it will activate me. So probably
Yeah.
the challenger, I would say.
Challenger. Okay, so what would
Yeah,
that
yeah.
look like when somebody activates you? What does that look like? And twofold question: what would it have looked like before you knew about the Enneagram, and what might it look like now? And is it even different?
I don't think that me knowing about the Enneagram has affected it so much as just being on, like, my journey, and
Uh-huh.
maybe I was in a part of the journey, in a big process of change when I did learn about the Enneagram anyways.
Mhm.
But certainly, the old me would have my sword out, you know, you know, kind of ready to
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
And the new me maybe has a concealed sword,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
just in
So,
case I need
yeah,
it.
yeah, right.
So, but at the same time, I'm not afraid to be the one who, I mean, less so, but I will stick my neck out for a cause, or, if I think that someone is misusing authority is a big one for me,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Mm.
So
So,
a few certain situations kind of come to mind right away,
yeah,
but
yeah. So when you talk about the big sword and just like the little sword, if I guess like if you might need it, I think of the big sword energy as the Avenger, destroyer, the lower side that most people say, oh, they're an 8. And it's like, oh, they're that, right? Um, and so where were you in your self-work, I guess, when you realized, totally apart from the Enneagram, because this is just self-awareness stuff, when you realized the big sword, that there was an option to the big sword, like what was that process like?
Oh, it's been a very long process. There wasn't like any one moment, I don't
Yeah.
think, where I sort of, I didn't have like a big pivotal moment where something crashed or burned
Mm,
or anything like that. And I realized that was not the way to go, but it's probably been a series of different just experiences and awarenesses, and maybe the process of having a meditation practice has,
mm,
and aging and all of
yeah.
that. It's
Yeah.
just kind of softened
Yeah.
me, and in some ways started to care less about some things too, and realizing that it doesn't really matter what's out there
Yeah. So at
as
this
much,
point, what's important enough to care more about? What are the causes now as opposed to before?
Um, well, I mean, I think, there's a lot of things that are going on right now in the world where like spiritual bypassing and, these people who are throwing their, throwing their hand up about social injustice, and in the process of doing that are um, really blocking the possibility of growth,
Yep. Yep.
and um, maybe don't actually know what's going on. Like, to me, what I see right now is I see that we're in a very confused world.
Mm,
And
mm,
um, and I think right now in these days, um, everyone just needs to take a step back
yeah.
and broaden their scope, get
Yeah.
their um,
Discern.
open their focus up a little bit, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
realize that none of us really know what's going on. And so I would say my personal journey has been more about trying to help people see that
Yeah.
having a strong opinion on something probably isn't that beneficial.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
In spiritual direction, we always say there's both
So
and.
it's,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
yeah, anyways. So.
so that stepping back and widening the vision, I hear the 5 line. I don't know if you would agree with that, but that's what I'm hearing, you moving into your 5 lines. So for 8, that's the low, you know, well, that's the stress point. That's where 8's go in 5, in stress. They go to 5 in stress. But that's where uninformed 8s will go. That's where any of us will go when we're uninformed. We'll go to our stress line. But I believe, the people that I work with, I always say, once you know your Enneagram, you have a choice. Yes, you can go to 5 in stress. You can go to the low side of 5 in stress. But now you're informed. So you can go to the high side of the 5, which I kind of see in you with your meditation practice, and not just having that practice, but teaching that. Going off into where I'm coming from, the wilderness is where where you're at, and that being a call for you, right? To me, that's you following the high side of your 5 line. So what do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I've always gravitated toward getting out in nature, and this is,
Yeah.
sitting in the forest or being in a canoe and just paddling in silence, and just letting the sound of the birds and the wind
Mm.
um, you know,
What's it do
bring
for you?
bring just a feeling.
Peace.
Sorry?
Yeah. I said, what does it do for you? All those
Yeah.
things. This brings you to peace.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a form of meditation. It's
Yeah.
calming. It's,
Yeah.
it gets rid of the noise,
Yeah.
just settles the nervous system down,
Yeah.
and usually, I mean, it helps with pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
So if something were to come about that kept you from having access to that, what would it do to you as an 8?
I find it. I don't think I could.
That's an 8 answer. I love it.
like
Yeah.
I would find a meditation video.
Uh-huh.
I would put on some
Yeah.
noise canceling headphones,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
to my happy place visualization. Like I always
Yeah.
have it, right?
Yeah.
You can't
Right.
take it away.
Right. Right. Right.
That's
Yeah.
something that I've ensured
Hmm.
in
Yeah.
my adult life, is that I always
Good.
have space to
Yeah.
go to.
Yeah. Were you like that as a kid too?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, when things got stressful for me,
Uh-huh.
I would go jump on my horse and go for a really, really, really
Ah.
fast run through the fields. And that was
Ah, had to
like,
be fast though, huh?
well, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
When I was young,
That's,
it
yep.
was always, I mean, it was, the adrenaline rush or
Yeah.
whatever was
Yeah,
just
totally.
cleared
Yeah.
the mind. But I was in my I was in my probably my mid-20s when I started to get into really into meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you found that young. Um, since you brought up the horses, I would love to go down that road and tell me a little bit about your experience, your history with horses over the years and more recently, and help refresh my memory because I know you're nursing a shoulder injury surgery from a shoulder injury. Did the horse have anything to do with that, or it did?
Oh,
Okay,
sure did.
I thought it did. Okay, if you
Yeah.
could speak to the
Yeah.
whole thing with the horses, the love of horses, and up till now.
Well, I grew up on a farm and I always loved horses. We had horses when I was really little, and then my family got rid of them, and I wanted my own horse. So my parents said, well, buy it yourself. So I shoveled manure and cut grass and yeah, I actually babysat for my saddle, but I worked really hard to save money
Yeah.
and bought my own horse, and he was actually killed on the road, maybe a year and a half after
Oh.
that. So that was a big, um, that
Mm.
was a big trauma. And anyways, I ended up basically being given this old, amazing horse that I grew up with into my teenage years.
Mm.
And I competed on him, and really, he was, my best friend. And and then I started to train horses a little bit as well. And then I had to make some, decisions about my future. And I really didn't like the small town life for many
Mm.
reasons. So I
Yeah.
had to give up the horses, and I went to the city, and
Mm.
I rode and was around them any opportunity that I got. But,
Mm.
I really went for 30 years, not really having horses in my life.
Mm. Mm.
And I got to a point in my career where I could take a day off a week and start to go out to stables again. So I
Mm.
started riding again. And yeah, and I started working with a new trainer at a stable, and she was putting me on this horse that I didn't like. I thought he had a unpredictable
Mm.
attitude, and I was trying to
Mm.
get her to put me on a different horse.
Mm.
And yeah, so I went out one day to ride, and I was distracted and not in a good mood, and I told her I didn't want to ride, and she kind of bullied me into riding, and then I ended
Mm.
up getting into a tangle, and that's when I dissected my vertebral artery and got my brain injury,
Mm.
was that day.
Mm.
And um I
Mm.
was 4 solid years of not being in a very, in a lot of pain, daily migraines and soft tissue and all kinds of stuff. And then did a
Were
lot of
you an
healing. And
acupuncturist yet at that point? You were.
oh
Okay.
yeah, no, this is 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was that
Yeah.
recent. Okay. Okay.
And just this past year was when I sort of got back to being a whole human again.
Mm.
And and I rescued this my first horse a year and a half ago. I didn't even realize she was wild when I bought her. Was lied to. And
Wow.
yeah, so
So an
she
8 gets a
was,
wild horse.
yeah,
Wow. That's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we healed each other's PTSD.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
And so I would just go out into the field and meditate
Mm.
with her. And she would slowly start coming closer and closer to me. And the neighbors would, my place is very wide open. There's not a
Uh-huh.
lot of traffic, but there's a fair bit. And the neighbors would, every now and then I'd see a neighbor and like, are you sleeping in the field?
Oh.
Why don't you just sit there? Right. And I would be out meditating in the fields with my horse. So then this spring I decided I was training horses in Nicaragua as well 2 years
Uh-huh.
ago. And
Yeah.
so this year I bought a couple more horses. One of them was another rescue, and the other one was supposed to be my fancy horse. And she sure fancy threw me off through the air. That was the white one.
Oh, oh,
Um,
wow.
and tried to kick me in the head as she threw me off, like really maliciously.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I did this. So
Is that how
that
that
was,
happened?
and
Wow.
yeah, and the day, and again, it's like, am I gonna learn? Like, am I gonna learn? Hello? Because that day things were off. She was
Yeah.
a little bit off. And I mean, you just shouldn't get on a horse where things are off.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did. I'm stubborn, you
So
know.
so eights use this a lot. Um, but at the end of the day, they're body types. So you say, do I ever learn? So what does that mean to you as an eight? Is it, do I ever learn? Or is it in your body? Like, did the knowing, like where, what was it? What was going on?
Um, well, my intuition was telling me to not do it, but
Mm.
my stubborn brain is the one that,
Yeah.
drives everything
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
It's a little bit A-type personality, and the I
Yeah.
can do anything.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Got it. Okay.
so yeah, well, that will I ever learn thing, it seems to always come in physical injuries,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That's like,
Mm-hmm.
some people get cancer, some people whatever get into really toxic relationships, or
Relationships.
different
Yeah.
people do it in different ways, but
Yeah. Yeah.
really for me it's like physical,
Yeah.
always
And
physical
physical
injury.
because you
Yeah.
didn't follow your intuition?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's that five, right? So that's that space that where the eight can access that happens in five, or can happen in the five. A couple of places I want to go, but you mentioned Nicaragua. That was shortly after I met you. Since I've met you, which was around the time of the pandemic, or shortly after the pandemic, you've been, that I can count, and I may be missing one, Nicaragua, Mexico, and Morocco. Did I miss one since 2020?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Um,
just Scotia, but I was teaching there.
where?
Nova Scotia,
Nova
Eastern
Scotia.
Canada.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure there has to have been other exotic travel prior to that. Yes. Yeah. Because to me, the whole travel thing, since I've known you, seems to be so deep. Like you don't just go to Wyoming. Like you go to these big, rich, lush, exotic, eight energy place. When you were going to Morocco, and so here's the other thing about Lisa, she goes to these places by herself, and once with your cat, right? It was once, I think.
Yeah.
um, you just have this bold, fearless eight energy, and it's like, what calls you? Why these places? Why the way you do? Tell me, because I wish I had what you have.
Yeah, it's a variety of things, but I mean, I can't stand the same thing all the time.
Uh,
I get, I wouldn't say bored, but restless. Like I love it up here where I live,
uh-huh.
but 6 months is enough.
Yeah.
It's just, it's too quiet. It's really perfect to have this much quiet, but then it's
Mm.
like time to go. And so I like extreme experiences. And when I say extreme experiences, like, no, I will never skydive or paraglide or do
Oh,
any of like not risky things in that
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like my favorite places in the world are Japan, St. Lucia, Czech Republic, um, places that have really diverse culture. Food is always huge for me.
Mm.
Architecture, that's
Yeah.
just very different and fascinating. Of course, everywhere you go, the people, right? People say,
Mhm.
oh, well, go there, the people are amazing. The people are amazing everywhere. People are amazing
Yeah,
everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go,
exactly.
right?
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
always going to find incredible, kind-hearted, generous,
Yep.
beautiful people.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's always so
Yeah.
funny to me. Oh yeah, you went there. Oh, the people are so nice. I'm like, they are, yes, they are. They're amazing. Like, that's sort of a given
Yeah.
everywhere, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except sometimes in big cities
Right.
where sometimes the people are really nice. You just never get to know
Never
that
get to know
because
them. Right.
they're too busy. Yeah, they're too busy to stop and share.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, each place has its own kind of attraction. For Morocco, it was really like when I think of Morocco after being there as well, it's like it's the smells, it's the sounds, it's the tiling, the art, the culture is
Yeah.
just splendid. The
Yeah.
weather,
Yeah. Your
um,
pictures were beautiful. The
oh,
pictures that you were
so
posting, they were beautiful.
so beautiful, and it was really inexpensive, which
Mm.
I haven't
Yeah.
really worked full time for 5 years, so I'm not exactly going to Switzerland. Um, but so that was a big one. And Nicaragua was really, I mean, a big part of the reason I went there was because it's very affordable, and I knew
Mhm.
that Central America,
Mm.
um, Central American culture is it's lovely. It's nice. It's very kind of agricultural and
Mhm.
pretty simple, and
Okay.
it's very poor. So they get around with ox carts and
Right.
horses and
Right.
motorcycles.
Yeah.
And I love that simplicity as much as I love, the technology that comes out of Japan, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I always just love having those. And, Japan, I love Japan, the thermal culture,
Mm.
hot springs. I love, love,
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
thermotherapy. And yeah, I mean, everything that Japan does, they do it
Yeah.
in just incredible ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I want to back you up to Nicaragua because Lisa's making this sound like, well, she just, picked up and went to Nicaragua and just loved the culture and the, everything there. And, yeah, that's all in there. However, you spoke not a word of Spanish, as I recall. Am I right about that?
I I had a little bit of
A little bit?
Spanish.
Okay.
Not fluent,
Okay.
but I could speak a bit of Spanish.
Okay. And you did go alone with your cat Trixie, right? Just
Yes.
the two of you.
Yep.
And you lost her one or two nights. Was she gone? I remember she got away.
Um, yeah, she wasn't gone overnight. She did come home in the evening, but
Okay.
my first day there, she took off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I remember you being pretty upset about that. And then you managed to work there. Not really being fluent, you didn't
Yeah.
know anybody there, right? You just picked up and went, right? I mean, like you're taking all this in stride, like you're right, like most people wouldn't do it that way. And you just went and found it. And it found you. And it just so just speak to that a little bit. Just getting to this place where you had never been there, right? Had you been there before? Okay. So never been there.
No.
You weren't fluent in the language. You're there alone with your cat who gets lost. And then You had no plan for work, right? You didn't like go there knowing you had work, or did you?
Oh, I'd done some research before I went, and I'd actually
Mhm.
applied to work at, like, as a workaway at
Okay.
a couple of ranches to train
Okay.
horses.
Okay.
So
So you did know you
sort
were
of
going to do
had
that.
that as,
Okay.
well,
Okay.
I hadn't been accepted. I'd never heard back from them or
Oh,
anything,
wow.
but it was,
Okay.
yeah, as an option.
Yeah.
And I do plan things a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I had, I'd engaged in some Facebook groups to see like where more kind of awakened spiritual conscious communities were.
Uh-huh.
So I sort of knew where I was going to be a little bit more open
Open.
to,
Yep.
the kind of
Mhm.
work that I did. And I knew
Yeah.
there were a few expats there. So
Uh-huh.
I had a pretty good sense that I probably would be able to do a little bit of acupuncture and maybe some body work. And I also have my online business.
Yeah.
So where I
Yeah. Which
go,
gives you
I can
freedom.
work on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing about it is that most people don't, that like makes it kind of easy is like living up here in the country, especially that year, because I didn't have a wood stove. It costs $500 to $800 a month just to heat my
Wow.
house.
Wow.
That's another couple $100 a month to plow my driveway in the winter,
Mm, mm.
right? So when it comes down to it, I can go and rent a place in a country like Nicaragua or somewhere that's not
Cheaper to live
expensive,
there.
and it
Yeah.
costs me less money than living
Yeah.
here,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and I was I was renting my place out on Airbnb while I was gone, so I was cash positive.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always, work out quite that well if it's
Mhm.
more expensive where I'm
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
does, it's it's expensive to live here in the wintertime.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
costly. And I mean, there's nothing here. I'm making money online no matter where I am.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Good.
So it's not
So,
quite as wild and crazy as it seems
well,
maybe.
no, I mean, there's a plan to it, but there's a boldness too. I mean, there's thought out decisions and reasons, but once those are made, from my perspective, you take huge, bold leaps, and they don't fluster you. From my observation, I mean, maybe they do, and we don't see it. But
Mm.
I think that's the challenger part of your eightness. It's like, yeah, let's take it on. Life's an apple, let's bite it. So that's kind of how, like, when you tell me you're going to these places, I'm like, I don't know anybody that go. And I mean, most of my family is from Sicily. It's kind of right across from, not that far from Morocco. I don't know any of them that have gone to Morocco. We've all dealt with, Moroccan, vendors that would come to town and, get to see some of the culture that way. But I don't know anybody that went to Morocco, let alone alone. And, when you told me that, I was like, wow, that's just such an eight decision. And choice. And then the way you stepped into the whole thing. So I know that you did speak to me at one point about it was different being a different experience being a woman alone. I believe it was a woman alone in Morocco was how you said it. So I don't know if I got that right, but
It was different than I expected,
okay. Tell
for
me.
sure, because everyone had warned me about being a woman
Uh-huh.
traveling alone in a Muslim country,
Right.
that's really conservative.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, I felt more protected there than I've ever felt probably anywhere ever in
Interesting.
my life.
Wow. So what's that
Yeah,
like
the
for an eight?
only
The person that protects everybody else feeling like what was that
it was
experience like?
amazing. It was, yeah. I mean, there was a couple little moments, but I think we all have little moments no matter
Yeah.
where we are in the world where we're,
Right.
like
Yeah.
that, and again,
Yeah.
especially not speaking the language, but there's
Right.
a lot of people speak English there. Most people speak French and
Right.
or
Right.
Spanish as well.
Yeah.
Between
Yeah.
my couple of years that I'd been in Spanish speaking countries
Uh-huh.
and my French,
Mhm.
somehow they understood my Frangle Spanglish communication.
Mm.
So no, it was, there were a couple, like people would be like, oh, I'll take you there, I'll show you there. And they'd offer to show you and then ask for money after. So that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that was something that I found a little bit annoying because it's hard to say no,
Yeah. Yeah.
no, I'll find my own way, like
Right.
it kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
don't tell me you're my friend and then ask me for
Right.
money kind of
Right.
thing, you know.
Right.
Um, but no, I did not feel unsafe, or I didn't feel objectified. I didn't feel like, but I also was respectful of the
Right.
culture. I wasn't
Absolutely.
walking around
Right.
in short shorts or,
Right.
low cut tops or
Right.
anything that would draw attention to
Right.
myself because I just don't like that.
Right. Right.
So it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
a problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. How long were you there?
I was there for just over 3 weeks.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Very cool.
It's a big country.
Well, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
travel throughout? I remember pictures of
Oh
you on a
yeah.
camel.
Yeah. I went, I was in 7 different areas, I think, 7 or
Okay.
8 areas.
Yeah. What was it
So I
like
went
riding
into
a
the
camel?
Sahara. I've ridden a camel before.
Oh, you have? Of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Where?
Just at like a county fair or some
Oh,
crazy thing
okay.
like that. Like it
Okay.
was not a real safari ride,
Uh-huh.
but I knew
Okay.
that they were pretty uncomfortable. Um,
Uh,
but it was pretty cool because my camel and I like made friends,
of course.
like because I'm an animal person.
Right.
So
Right.
the first
Right.
thing I did, said hello to my camel and gave him a little ear scratch, and then the girl behind me, she tried to befriend her camel, and her camel basically
Bit
tried
her.
to bite her, and
Oof.
she's like, "I want your camel," and then I went over to her camel and I scratched it, and it was
Made
fine,
friends.
So, but they're pretty cool. The
Yeah.
funny thing about riding a camel is they're laying down and you get on them and then they get up
Right.
and like
Yeah.
they get their back end up and then they get their
Yeah.
front end up and you feel like
Mm.
you're going to be flipped over their heads.
Wow. Wow.
Uh, but we also had a sandstorm on our ride through the desert on a
Oh,
camel.
wow.
So yeah, so that was
Wow.
pretty cool, actually. I was really glad that I'd gotten
Had
them
the
to wrap,
covering. Yeah.
wrap my scarf up.
Yeah.
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 So, it was a really nice experience. And I was glad that I got, I did meet a lot of um Moroccan people, which a lot of the times when you're traveling, you don't actually get to meet
Right.
the local
Yeah. The
people very
locals.
much.
Yeah.
And so, I'm always asking them about their stories and their experiences and their families, and they always have these big, long, multi-generational,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
experiences of how they got where they are. And I
Mhm.
found it very fascinating.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Um, how do you experience the shadow side of the 8? How does that?
Um, well, I mean, when I was younger, I'm also a redheaded Gemini, so I would say that I've been known to have an Irish and German, and a family history of alcoholism. So I've been known to have a temper.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm stubborn. I have a Taurus moon, I want to I've wanted to have it my way or the highway.
Uh-huh.
And I've experienced a lot of that. And I mean, it's probably part of how I ended up starting to travel alone when I was younger was, um, I felt like I don't want to have to travel with someone and spend my hard-earned money to go and see this place and then never get to see and do and experience the things that I want to see and do,
Right.
and have to, you know, do these other things to appease, because I can be very appeasing too, right? Like I can put my own wishes and needs aside
Mm-hmm.
and just, appease to authority or someone who, if I want, if I feel like I want someone to like me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I used to be much more that way too, whereas now I figure if someone doesn't, if I don't jam properly with them, then that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I could be a little bit of a chameleon, but there were times and places where I was like, this is how I want it to be, and this is how it's going to be. And I know I can make it like that. So I'm just going to,
Yeah.
you know, do it. But, and the other side I would say would be a little bit of arrogant is a strong word, but it could have been a little bit of, arrogance about being
Mhm.
right or being smarter or, not necessarily
Stronger,
superior, because I never really better, sorry,
stronger. Does that come into play? Being
stronger.
stronger?
People always told me that I was very strong, but I never really felt very strong.
Mm, mm. That's common for eights to
So,
say. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you
So,
were mentioning kind of like trying to I don't remember the word that you used, but kind of melding with other people is kind of how I took it. And I was thinking along the lines of the nine wing. I kind of heard echoes of a nine wing. And of course, the other side for the eight is the seven. Um, so which do you think is your wing? Have you gotten to explore? The seven being the one that wants to have fun and kind of escape and have a good time. They're all about the next best thing. And then the nine is the peacemaker, the mediator, the person that's going to kind of blend with the group to make peace, to make everybody happy and have peaceful.
no,
No, that's not you.
no,
Not with
no,
all the meditation in the world.
it's no. I mean, I would like, even as a kid, like my whole life, I never fit into any group,
Mhm.
right? I was always an outlier.
Okay.
And there would often be one or two people in the group that I liked, that I cared what they thought about me, and I wanted them to be my friend. But most of
Mhm.
them, I never, you
Mhm.
know, I mean, there have been times when I have been a mediator at like, I would get kicked off the debate team in school because I could argue both sides. I'd be like, oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, and when you talk about that, and then I could, and then I could speak to that point, and then someone would say something on the other side. I'd be like, you know what, that's actually
Right.
a really good point, and da 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 da. And so I got asked to leave, you know. Um, and I was like, well, I think every conversation has two sides to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't say that was so much, I don't know what that is. I mean, I don't know enough about the Enneagram to know what it is, but I definitely, especially when I was younger, I was a bit of a partier. I wanted to
Okay.
have a good time.
Yeah. So that's more
Uh,
seven-ish. Yeah.
yeah, I still love to dance,
Uh-huh.
and I love the opportunity to. It's not always easy. I can get serious about life sometimes, but I
Oh,
really like to go and
you
just
like to have fun. Yeah.
let it all go free. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like the seven wing. So we haven't talked about your two line, um, which is the giver, the helper, the person who can anticipate the needs of others before the other might even know they have a need. But that's the low side of two. So the natural movement for eight is to go to the high side of two, because that's where you're going to go in security when you want to achieve and attain something. Um, and obviously you're in a profession where you're a healer, And you're a teacher, so you're giving on both sides of that. So that's the obvious stuff. But tell me about your experience of your 2 line.
Um, I would say, you know, like I've learned as I whatever grow up to try to ask people what they need or what they want, which a lot of people I realize don't actually know what it is that they need or what they
Yeah,
want. But I
yeah.
try to help them see or understand that rather than how can I help or
Mm,
just doing what I think is best for them.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and alternately, I'm very sensitive to that, I would say, especially as, as I get older and mature, to
Mm,
people who just do something for you so that they can feel like they've done something but haven't really found out if what they're doing is what you want or need.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I have a real kind of awareness of that. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but it is something that I've noticed that a lot of people do,
Mm-hmm,
and they just go and do something, and it's like, well, that's not actually very helpful.
right, right,
Like, did you ask
right.
them what they want instead of what
Yeah,
you think they want?
right, right.
Is that a
Well,
true
yeah, I
thing?
mean, what I'm hearing there is the respect for boundaries. And
Hmm.
and that's a 2 issue, like, an unaware 2 or a low 2 doesn't have those boundaries. They just step in and they'll be intrusive, in a loving and giving way that is usually
Yeah.
more than the person wants to have coming at them. So I hear that, respect for boundaries. So then as an 8, because my experience in having 8s in my life is, um I think 5s are the best with boundaries, but I think 8s are pretty solid with their own boundaries.
Hmm.
Like entering into the kingdom of an 8 takes some bravery, because those boundaries can almost feel electrified. I don't think the 8
Hmm.
means for them to be, but some of them may, but I don't think it's intentional on the 8's part. I just think it's vibrational. So
Right.
would you say you're good with boundaries for yourself?
I've had to really work on it. I think
Really?
when you're saying the electrifying, I think I probably have put out a very protective
Yeah,
energy around
right,
myself, and that's
right.
very unconscious.
Mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm. Yep,
and it is my self-protective
yep,
walls or shields.
yep.
But actual boundaries, like if someone
Gotcha.
is inside of that,
Uh-huh.
uh, I had a lot of challenges
Yeah.
actually with that, and a lot of the problems that I've come into in my life were because I did what someone else
Wanted. Yeah.
wanted me to
Mm-hmm.
do, or instead of
Yeah.
really just kind of having,
Yeah.
that space for
Yeah.
myself and what I needed. And that's something that, I feel like a lot of these experiences I've had that have been
Mm,
extremely um, forceful in the past few years have really
mm,
been the universe
mm.
making me
Set
learn
the
how to,
boundaries. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's the the 2, which again, theoretically, you're supposed to go to the high side of 2 more naturally, but that sounds like the low side of 2, of wanting to help. Like, what gets 2s tripped up is, hang on a second, my little dog is going to need to go ahead. You can go. You don't have to be here. Go ahead. Now she doesn't want to go. Okay. She's acting like she wanted to leave. Um, so, but 2s get angry. Hang on a minute. Go ahead. You can go. Go ahead. It's okay. You can jump. Go. Go ahead. She can jump. She can jump, but she didn't think she could. So 2s get angry when they have devoted too much of their energy to helping other people or anticipating the needs of other people and doing things that aren't necessarily wanted, valued, appreciated, even seen, and then the 2 gets really pissed off and goes to the volatile side of 8. So boundaries. So 2s are notoriously, they need boundary work. And I'm just wondering if that's where your boundary challenge might be in somewhere between the 8 and the 2 journey. I don't know. I kind of felt like I heard that. I also want to back up to the electrification of the fence, the boundary, the personal boundary, that you said was kind of not consciously formed, because I think that's really interesting, actually. 8s, more than anything, fear being vulnerable. I know we've chatted about that in the past. So I mean, I have ideas about that, but I can't speak to it in terms of what it's like to live in a body with an 8 energy, having an unconsciously formed electrified fence for a boundary so I don't get hurt. Does that, where can you fill in gaps for me, for people that really want to understand the 8 and vulnerability?
Well, I think, when I was reading a little bit about um the Enneagram stuff, and them talking about them sort of getting formed, like that your Enneagram is formed in life.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
your astral sign that you're
No,
born
yeah.
with. It's something
Yeah, it
is your
evolves.
experience. And so for me, that's definitely something that it was a it was a self-protection, self-preservation as a child.
Mm,
um
mm,
because my parents were not very good parents.
mm,
They
mm,
weren't very kind or attentive.
mm,
And
mm,
um, it was a my way or the highway. I'll
mhm,
give you something to cry about kind of,
mm,
kind of upbringing. And I think a lot of people experience that in certain generations. I'm not the
yeah,
only person.
yeah,
And different people, um, respond differently
right,
to that
right.
that kind of
Mm,
treatment.
mm,
But definitely I was a very sensitive child. So that was really difficult to not be
mm,
heard
yeah.
um, as a kid. So
So,
that's probably where,
mhm. So to not,
and
go ahead, go ahead.
no, it's okay.
I was going to say to not be heard was difficult, which sounds like the echo of the 5 line. Um, what was difficult as so the personality, the Enneagram type forms between birth and about age 21. So what was difficult? Was there anything difficult as well about being vulnerable? Like, what can you see your evolution into needing to be the protector and the challenger because that energy wasn't there for you as that
For
type
sure.
was being formed?
Yeah, for sure. I
Mm,
mean, I could years of therapy,
yeah, yeah.
um, go into that.
Yeah, yeah.
But like I had a really bad accident. I died when I was 7 years old. I had a really bad accident.
Wow.
And um and when I came out of the I had pain, right? My whole
Right.
life
Yeah.
from it. And in our household it was, yeah, stop sulking, get on with it. Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm,
we got work to do, get out of our way kind of thing.
yeah.
And and the answer was no to almost everything, right?
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
no negotiation, there was no conversation, there was no discussion. It was inconvenient.
Mm,
And it was pretty harsh.
mhm,
Um and my dad liked to really do what he liked to do, and he didn't like anything getting in his way of doing that. And
mm,
there was a lot of um act now, apologize later kind of
mm,
behavior, except it wasn't apologize, it was
mm,
throw money at it and make it go away,
mm,
right?
mm,
So that sort of developed a lot of unhealthy money habits in
mm,
my
mm,
well.
mm. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
So definitely, as soon as I heard our Enneagram numbers were kind of formed by our childhood, it really made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and in terms of like the two and the boundaries, that was something I figured out, gosh, like 10 years ago, that maybe I was doing the work I was doing for the wrong reasons,
Mm, mm,
and was get really burned out and tired. And
mm,
I have someone at my door. I'm gonna
mm.
pause for a second.
Sure, sure. Yep.
Lisa?
Yep.
Um, yeah, so the boundaries, around my work, and I
Yeah.
sort of started to realize that I was always the fixer,
Mm,
but
mm,
also like at home, I was kind of always blamed for everything.
mm-hmm.
So I always wanted to make it right.
Yeah.
And had to protect my mother. So, a lot of
Oh,
this stuff that
wow.
I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's directly
Yeah.
related to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly when you're talking about that too, and those boundaries that, yeah, a big part of I see
Mm-hmm.
that as how a big part of the reason why I got into the work that I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm into it. I'm an intuitive healer type
Mm-hmm.
anyways.
Right. Right.
That was certainly a big thing that needed to be healed because I just kept getting so exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna go over some of my notes and see if I've missed anything. I'm sure I've missed a few. Oh, what's it like for you when somebody won't engage and they walk away?
It used to infuriate me.
Why?
What do you mean? You won't even give me a chance to try to be your friend? It used to infuriate me. And, and then I went through a period where I was like, yeah, I terrify people, and I sort of came to an acceptance of that. And then over time, I just, and it became something that I didn't love about myself because I knew that I turned people off, right? I know some people just don't like me. Like I just rub them the wrong way. And now I just realize, part of who I am, it's not something I do conscious, but it's part of who I am is I reflect a mirror at people,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And so they have to, it often forces them to look at themselves
mhm, mhm, mhm.
and how they react to something as kind of blatant as a Lisa.
Yeah.
And I tried to be less of who I was for a while, and that
What
didn't
did that
work.
feel like?
I just felt like I was hiding.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't a good feeling. And then for a while I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna be whoever I am and say what I want to say. And if you don't like me, too bad.
Mhm, mhm,
And I think I've come to a little bit more balanced place somewhere in the middle where I'm like, well, I can be everything that I am.
mhm.
And, you know, and it
Yeah.
can be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, self-love, I think at the end of the day is what helps people like you more as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
Okay. Um, what's the best thing about being an 8?
I'm free.
Ah, that's that 8-7. 7 likes freedom too.
Yeah, I'm free,
7's all about
right?
freedom. Yeah.
If I have, I'm a bit of a visionary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that holds me back is me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I'm not held back by a job or society or a set of ideas that make me think that, I
Mm-hmm.
can't do something or something's not
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Mm-hmm.
I have the kind of sense of reality. It's maybe a little bit askew, but I have,
Mm-hmm.
pretty good sense of reality of what I can manifest into being
Yeah.
through hard work and intuition and just kind of divine grace,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's a confidence in that, right? That once I
Mhm.
decide that I'm going to manifest something or do
Mhm.
something, that can usually,
Right.
yeah, I get a
Right.
little interference from, my stupid brain that gets a little stubborn
Mhm. Mhm.
sometimes, but
Yeah.
generally I can make really delicious lemonade. Yeah.
Okay. So what's the worst thing about being, or the hardest thing about being an 8?
Pretty much the same thing.
So speak to that a little bit.
Um, there's an impatience of knowing, knowing you can do something, knowing that you can do most things on your own as well, and that if you really don't want to go it alone, um, you have to make a lot of compromises, and it might be really frustrating and difficult, and that you're kind of depending on other people for things to happen.
Yeah. What's it
And
like to rely on other people?
um it's often disappointing,
Um,
a lot of people are all talk and
yeah. Yeah.
not a lot of action,
Yeah.
and you know and then other people show up unexpectedly,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that's
So
really great. But obviously I have to learn how to depend on people because I keep having these injuries that make me have to.
yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Something I forgot to ask you about that for some reason in my head I tie it into the traveling, even though it's not anything like that. You just did a major renovation on your kitchen, right? And you just took
Yeah.
that, like, I don't know enough about that story. You just decided to do it? Like,
No, no, I didn't. I did it all actually. When I went away, so I sold a piece of property.
uh-huh,
It was part, it was part section of my property
mhm,
in the winter. And my plan was to take some of the money to develop this retreat center.
uh-huh,
That is my place a little
yeah,
bit.
uh-huh,
And, the first thing on the agenda, because I have no laundry in this old 150-year-old farmhouse.
oh, wow,
So the first thing on the agenda was to make a laundry room
laundry room,
and put
yeah,
in laundry.
yeah,
And I also had built, like, the house was gutted when I bought it. So I had built like a treatment room office
uh-huh,
in a room that had never had anything done to it above the kitchen. It was just kind of an attic.
uh-huh,
But the floor was caving in.
oh,
So you literally walk across the floor and it was like being in a bouncy castle.
oh, wow,
So I wasn't able, I spent all this money building this beautiful deck and building the room, and you
yeah,
couldn't
yeah,
use the room.
yeah,
So when I went away for 2 months last winter, once the money cleared for the sale of the land, my contractor was supposed to come in and just do a little bit of a reno on my kitchen,
mhm,
put some support beam on the ceiling,
uh-huh,
and build a laundry room. And the idea was I was just gonna have to shift the kitchen that I had around
uh-huh,
to make space for the laundry. That
okay,
was
yeah,
supposed to be the reno.
oh, okay,
And um and they came in and they started to do the demo for the laundry space, and they found black mold.
mm,
And this is while I was away,
yeah,
and it was not at all like my choice. It was a complete and utter disaster.
mm,
2 guys decided to completely gut my kitchen and bathroom
oh, wow,
themselves. And he had access to the local hardware store, my account there. So he was just, buying all the supplies that he needed and doing work and not showing me the work, not
oh,
sending me pictures, not
wow,
he didn't get anything approved by me.
oh,
um I had no idea what was going on, and I was like, okay. And I didn't even know that they totally gutted the kitchen.
oh,
Like, I had
wow,
no idea until I actually came home the
wow,
amount of demo demolition that they'd done.
Yeah.
And it was the middle of the winter, and they just thrown everything out onto the snowbanks, like they hadn't
Oh,
taken care in it. So everything was broken, and they
oh,
didn't cover anything. Everything was covered in crap and garbage. It was awful. That's why I went to Morocco, because
okay.
I came home.
Couldn't be here.
I
Yeah.
couldn't be here. I couldn't be in
Yeah.
my own house. I
Yeah.
had nowhere to really go.
Yeah.
I had a course that I was teaching in Ottawa like 2, 3 weeks after I came home. So I taught the course, and I booked a ticket, and I left again because
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
yeah. So it was horrible. It was really awful. And I had to fire, the contractor, because he was just losing his mind.
Oh.
And I just had like handyman doing, it was terrible.
But you took
Yeah.
control of it. So that's actually one of a unintentional segue into a question that I had here. What does an 8 do in the face of poor leadership? And I think you just gave us a pretty good example. You just took over and you became the general contractor and hired out yeah.
Yep.
Ultimately, because it's just safer and you protect yourself by doing that, right?
Yeah, but in this case, I had no choice. I mean,
Well,
contractors up here booked out for years.
mm,
You can't
mm,
find anyone,
mm,
so um it was but it was out of total necessity.
mhm,
But yeah, I
mhm.
assessed the situation. I was like, okay, well, this is
Yeah,
done now. There's nothing that,
right.
you know, nothing we can really do about it. So let's just move forward and
Yeah.
make the best of it.
Well,
So
in that moment of
yeah, so I
necessity,
mhm.
but in that moment of necessity, is there a total knowing of, I'm just going to do it. I can do it. Like, was there ever any question that you couldn't?
No.
Yeah. See, I think that's what defines the 8, because I think any of the other types wouldn't immediately take that stance. Of
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, yeah, I have no choice, but I'm gonna do it. Where some people would be just like crying in a corner before they figured out how to
Mhm.
do it.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's just that
There's a little crying in the
capability.
corner. Don't get me wrong. There was, there were definitely a little bit of crying in corners.
And it's
Um,
important to note that 8s do feel. Um, 8s have big, huge giving hearts in my experience. That most times they're afraid to show.
hmm,
Because that's that door to vulnerability, right? Until they know that that it's really safe to go there, they won't. Doesn't mean they don't have a heart. It certainly doesn't mean that they don't cry. And it's kind of funny because the non-recorded part of this interview, my little dog was sitting here crying, and Lisa was telling me about her shoulder hurting, and I said to the dog, I said, there can't be any crying. And you thought I was joking with you. So yeah, I mean, it is important to acknowledge and embrace the tenderness of the 8 and the 8's heart, which I think people forget to do a lot of the times. So yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So yeah, so you say a little bit of crying and then finish the sentence.
get on with it.
Why?
It's something that I have learned through a few different burnouts. It's like, okay, I'm really tired now,
Yeah,
or I need to just have a good frickin' cry,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And just do it and just be exhausted for, when it first started a day. And then,
yeah,
later on with bigger exhaustion, it's like, okay, I just need to lay here for a week, or
yeah,
however long I need to lay here, I'm just
yeah,
gonna lay here. Or however
yeah.
much I need to cry, I'm just gonna cry.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it's done, it's done.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
pick myself up and I keep going,
yeah,
and it's like,
yeah,
I just take that little time out. And if I take the time out,
yeah.
I come out of it as strong or
Yep.
stronger than I was
Yep.
before.
Yep. That's the
And,
thing about 8.
and I just,
Hmm.
yeah, and I don't dwell,
Yeah.
it's like, oh,
Yeah.
fucking time.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
Yep. Yep. Yep.
sorry for
Yep.
my language, but,
No. Yeah.
and I also just don't I don't want pity.
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
don't think pity is a very attractive
Well, it's vulnerability.
feeling.
Yeah.
I don't mind, like, if something shitty has happened, like
Hmm.
it's nice to know that people are on your team,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
that they care about you,
Hmm.
but I don't need to sit there and be like, oh man, it's not, and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
know,
Mm.
like you, that doesn't fix a problem.
Right.
If you have a problem, you fix the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Mm.
yeah.
Okay. All right. What what does weakness bring up for you? So this can be, you can answer this one however you want. Weakness in yourself or weakness in others. What is
Yeah, so that's totally shifted as well. When I was younger, I really thought that vulnerability was weakness, that
mm,
not being able to take care of things yourself, being emotional, like, we learned that that was all weakness. And I think that's
mm,
part of that patriarchal
mm,
kind of
mhm,
society as well that we grew up in, tough
mhm.
love and
Yep.
all of that kind of thing. And then, as I grew up and I met people and I realized how much strength it actually takes to show real
Yes.
emotion and to share your vulnerability and
Mhm,
scaredness, or whatever
mhm.
that might be, and really to put up that tough front is actually more weak than letting people actually
Yes.
see
Mhm.
who it is.
Yeah.
So I mean, weakness has, it's definitely, I know as an age, it's a thing, and it definitely is with
Mhm,
me,
mhm, mhm.
my whole like thing with the shoulder was, we have to be warriors now. We're in a time where, um, we have to be the
Mm,
strongest and the fittest and the healthiest physically, mentally, spiritually
yeah.
that we've ever been, like
Yeah.
in these
Yeah.
times. And I firmly believe that, and then
Mhm.
of course I had this happen. I'm like, seriously? Right? Is is my response to it.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of it is, well, this is the challenge, right? This is the challenge that's coming in, and
Mm,
I have to stop
mm,
and heal during this time
mhm. Yeah.
so that the strength is there later, right?
Yeah.
Be weak
Absolutely.
now so that you can be strong later.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So how about instead be soft now so you can be strong later?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, soft is good, but I don't want soft tendons.
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
I'll be emotionally soft, but I would like
Emotionally
nice
soft. Right. Right.
firm
Yeah.
tendons.
Yes. Yes. All righty. So beyond working with horses and doing body work, any other physical body-based things that you love to do?
Oh yeah, I love everything physical body based. I mean, before I had my head injury, I played softball, I played ultimate frisbee. I'm an avid paddler. Like I live near Algonquin Provincial Park. It's like canoe
Mhm.
heaven, where I love
Right.
canoeing, camping, hiking,
Yeah.
skiing, cross country skiing, alpine skiing, snowshoeing, ice skating, hockey. Um, so I'm pretty sporty, like not
Yeah.
necessarily good at sports, but
Right.
I'm
But you
I'm
like
a
jumping into them.
very physical
Physical
person.
person. Yeah.
I don't like risky. Like I actually, I joked about running on the horses, but that's
Hmm.
probably the only really risky thing
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
ever did. I'm very, even when I ski, like I granny ski,
Mhm.
that's always the joke.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I actually don't like adrenaline rushes very much.
Hmm. Okay.
But I do like really being in my body.
What does that do for you?
Gardening, digging in the garden.
Yeah.
It's grounding. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So from there, I'm going to go to a conversation we had earlier, where, and I've done this with a couple of people that I've interviewed. I have this personal fascination between the Enneagram, well, not just these two things, but they're among the, I like drawing the patterns between various ancient systems of wisdom. So we have the Enneagram and we have astrology. And recently, I started to notice in my own chart, position of Mars seems to have an expression of my line as a 5 to the 8. Because Mars is all about, action and going forward, a more yang kind of expression of energy, and 8's kind of like that. So we chatted before about your chart, and your Mars is in your 5th house of creativity, children, creativity, pleasure, and sex. So so I had asked you about your 8 nature. Does it feel like if you could pick a house, an astrological house, is the 5th house where it would like to live? So
Yeah, I mean, I would I I would like to be expressing my creativity more, I think,
mhm,
in like, I mean, I guess in a way, when I think about it now, like I was, oh well, my 8th house is really my house of work. But when I think about my work, really, I mean, even though it's Eastern medicine, which is considered a bit of science, I would say that
mhm,
actually it's an art as
yeah,
well, isn't it? Like,
spiritual as well, yeah, yeah,
and probably particularly like I practice Japanese acupuncture and a lot more esoteric kind of
right,
intuitive approaches.
yep,
So I probably do use my creativity
mhm,
and that side of things a lot in my work, because I do,
mhm,
I do a lot of just kind of holding and waiting and, you know, um, not by the book treatments ever,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
mhm,
ever.
yeah,
And even though when I think about my work, like as a professional, I think about that I get really good results, and that's what makes it
mhm,
satisfying. But at the end of the day, really what makes my work satisfying is that every case is a little bit different, and it always gets me thinking in
mhm,
creative ways,
yeah,
really. Like
right,
it's not,
yes,
I was thinking about the more traditional, like making art kind of creativity, but really, um,
it is art, it is,
I think I use creativity actually in all aspects of my life.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's like creative problem solving and
mhm,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So probably,
So is
it's
your,
funny because my initial reaction was different than how I
yeah,
see it now.
so is your expression of creativity more about physicality, like physical creativity? Like, would you be the person writing a novel or would you be the person sculpting marble?
Um, well, I mean, I crochet,
Okay,
I
physical.
sew, my creativity is very practical, I would say.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
more crafty
Okay,
in a
okay,
lot of ways.
okay. Um, let's see what else we have here. Hit those. Um, okay. Give me an example of your version of go big or go home.
Yeah, my just a couple of weeks. I stayed for the first 2 weeks after my surgery with my sister and
Mhm,
her partner. It's her second relationship. And
mhm.
he says, "You Dowling girls, you just don't play small, do you?" So yeah, I mean, sometimes I dabble in things.
Mhm,
Like you know, I do dabble in things a little bit, but for the most part, I mean, like you said, I travel, I go
mhm,
to, exotic places and I
mhm.
go alone. Buy rescue horses and buy 64 acres in the middle of the forest. So again, I do take risks, but the risks that I take, I would say, are generally pretty well calculated.
They're sensible.
Yeah, they're sensible
Mhm.
risks,
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say.
Mhm.
And I'm the same way with like my investments and
Mhm.
whatnot as well. So yeah, go big or go home.
So
I don't know.
with the shoulder and getting the diagnostics in order to get the shoulder surgery,
Oh, yeah.
can you apply go big or go home to that one for people listening? Because I think it's a pretty cool story.
Um, yeah, I guess, I mean, I know you kind of want me to tell you how it all came down. So, I had this fall and I was lying on the ground. I felt my arm completely come out of the shoulder joint. I heard it, I felt it.
Mm,
And I was lying there not sure if I could move. Um, and having treated several thousand rotator cuff injuries
mhm,
over my 25 years,
mm,
um, I knew it was bad.
yeah.
And, so my neighbor took me to emergency and
Mm,
I'm there and the doctor's like, we're going to take an x-ray. And I said, nothing's broken. Like,
mm,
can you give me an ultrasound, maybe an MRI?
mhm,
No, we can't do that. Just go for physio. I said, listen, I need an ultrasound. Well, you do physio for a few weeks, and if it doesn't feel better, come back. Okay. So, I did a couple physio appointments, and by this time, whatever, 3 weeks have passed, and I can't move my arm at
mhm,
all.
mhm,
Right. And like I said, done thousands of these myself. I know it wasn't a frozen shoulder.
mhm, mhm,
Um, so then I started to advocate for myself because Canadian healthcare is crappy,
mm,
and started to find out that the waits to get an MRI were 6 or 8 months, and I know, as an older person with previous shoulder injuries, that also my mother has exactly the same shoulder.
mm,
I don't know if I told you that.
mm,
So I've already been through this with her as well
mm,
and her MRI. So really like firsthand experience that, you've got 4 to 6 months. The tendons recede and then they can't
you
reattach them.
can't, right, right.
And there are very few options for
Yeah,
treatment.
yeah.
So I knew that I was staring this future, right? Which
Mhm,
is all I have to do
mhm,
is look at my mother and what she's been
right.
living through for
Yeah.
20 years.
Mhm.
And I was like, that's not
Gonna be
my
me.
future.
Yeah.
That's not my future.
Mm,
And so I reached out in my Facebook community to see what, if people knew surgeons, if anyone had a connection or, different therapies that people were using, and lots of people were, reaching out to me and whatnot. And I just could tell by the speed that things were going at that I needed to find somewhere where I could get an MRI
mhm,
without a doctor's referral,
mhm.
because the doctor's appointments that I could get were 6 weeks ahead. So then I
Couldn't
was
do
looking
that.
at already 3 months after this injury, and then another 6 to 8, 9,
Mhm.
10 months for an MRI to get to a surgeon. So
Yep.
it just was really clear to me that that was not how it had to go. Um, so someone who I work with lives in Cabo, Mexico, and he said, "Oh, the clinic that I work at, you don't need, you don't need a doctor's note, to get an MRI." So I called them and just asked questions, and I called them twice, not just once, because I wanted to make sure I didn't
Yep.
fly to Mexico and find out that I
Yeah.
couldn't get an MRI. So I spoke with
Right.
2 different people just to be sure,
Mhm.
and I booked it, and I booked a flight, and oh, well, you could have gone to Buffalo. I said, well, no, I couldn't because I still needed a doctor's note, and that's
Mhm.
6 weeks from now. So I just booked it, rented a car, and drove around Cabo for a couple of days and checked it out and got my MRI. And then when I came back, it was just 3 days later, I had my sports medicine doctor's appointment and I handed them, the MRI. So, and I knew there was still a chance that it would be too late, even by doing that, and that I still might have to go out of the country or out of the province and pay, have the surgery. Right. I knew that was still entirely possible.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest letdown of it all for me was I had sort of a list of surgeons that I had selected based on the information I'd given. I'd done, all the research. I looked at their reviews. I looked at, what papers they've done, what studies they've been involved with, because I knew I needed a really good surgeon. And, and I'd made my top choice, and I heard back from them and they had rejected my referral because he had a 24-month waiting list. And that was my big letdown. That was my big down,
Yeah.
So I was prepared. I found another surgeon in Montreal. It was going to be $15,000. I was like, you know what? There's no sense having retirement savings if
You can't move.
I'm gonna have to retire now. So I was ready. I was ready to cash in and go. And his secretary, I told him what I do, and I just said, it's a really bad injury. When Dr. Mullen gets back from vacation, if there's any way he can look at my MRI, I would be really grateful, and I just sent a really nice message. And and so they called me right after he came back, like Labor Day, and booked me in the next week. And she said to me, if he put me in front of 523 people.
Wow.
So she said, if he's bumping you up, he will get you in for this surgery. Start preparing. Right. And she told me right away there. And 2 weeks later, I was in surgery. So but that was all about, if I had just sat and waited for them to tell me when it was going to happen, I would be handicapped.
And no weight's going to do that. No weight's going to just stand by and wait. They're going to take charge, take control. And I mean, you did that brilliantly. And I think that's just one of the things that always impresses me about you is it is a thought out, the risk. You do the big things, you think them through, they're never chaotic. But there's this huge instinctual drive, I would say, underneath the things that I've seen you do, and this being, one of the more important ones being that, had to do with a significant injury. So, that definitely speaks to your 8. Couple of quick questions. We're going to wrap up shortly. Do people put you in leadership positions a lot?
Yeah.
You comfortable with that?
Yeah, I think, I when I was younger, I liked the idea of being a leader. I felt like I was a leader, and then I sort of led things and decided that I actually wasn't a very good leader because I was too bold and too direct and had a really difficult time, managing people. And I stepped away from that for a long time, actually. And then recently I've been, kind of going back to my shiatsu roots a little bit, and was sort of called and appointed, and I was quite resistant to taking on the role again and sort of getting burned again. And and a couple of like prominent men in the industry who have more experience than me, and who've run schools for years but have basically retired, said, I don't want to run this myself, but I will very much stand behind you and support you in this process. So I was like, oh, okay. And that's the first time I've had that reaction to something like that, because before I've sort of taken on with the sense that I should be there, whereas this time I was much more kind of timid and hesitant to accept it. But still sort of knowing that no one else will get the job done like me. Like, because I'll just do it.
Yeah. Yep.
I'll just get it done.
Yep. Exactly.
So, but
Exactly.
the trick is really managing the energy of the others. So this time around, like one of the people in the group, I'm like, okay, so you manage the energy of the space,
Mhm.
and I'll just kind of drive the bus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And it
Well,
worked
hopefully,
well for you.
well, I mean, we're in it.
You're in it.
So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Feels different though. Sounds like it
Yes.
feels different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Good.
Yeah.
Good. What does injustice do to you?
Makes my blood boil.
Mm. And then what do you do about that?
Um, it depends on what the injustice is. Again, I think if there's one thing the last few years have taught me is that things are not always what they seem to be.
Mm.
So, there are a lot of things that I was quite passionate about, maybe at different points in my life, where I'm looking at now going, that's maybe not what I thought it was.
Mm.
So, and that probably annoys me as much as anything, is that we just, you know, we just can't even know what is or what isn't anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's been also kind of free, because I worry about it less.
Yeah.
I know that we get our hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The last question, knowing what you know just by being on the journey of life and doing your inner work, and knowing what you know about the Enneagram and leading with type 8, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self? And the reason I say 20-year-old self, that's where the Enneagram is mostly formed. At about 21, it's solidly formed. So just at the cusp of that moment, knowing what you know now, what would you tell 20-year-old Lisa?
Learn to listen.
Okay. All righty. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add that I didn't cover about being an 8? And
Man, you covered a lot.
okay. All righty. Well, Lisa, again, thank you for being here. I want to get your website. Again, I'll have this in the show notes for people, but it's meridiancarecenter.com. So if you're a massage therapist or acupuncturist looking for CEUs, check that out. If you're an Enneagram type 8 or know a type 8, share this episode. Remember to like, subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in doing Enneagram work with me, I do that work online in spiritual direction. I do Enneagram typing interviews if you're not sure of your type. And that's about it. My website's mariamandarino.com, and I'll have all of this in the show notes. Lisa, again, thank you so much for doing this. This has been months in the making. People have no idea how busy this woman has been. And I thank you for taking the time to do this. And I know that you've got to heal this too. So thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Marie.
Okay.